The following is a Hoop Ball presentation.
Welcome to another edition of the Hoop Ball Sacramento Kings podcast. I'm your host, Christian Villere. You can find me on Twitter at MyBuddyChris. For all of Hoop Ball's Sacramento Kings coverage on Twitter, it's at HoopBallKings. And for all of your NBA news, NBA fantasy news, and Sacramento Kings coverage, period, it's hoop-ball.com. If you're playing fantasy basketball or DFS, go to the website to get the season pass, to get all of the premium fantasy content today. If you are a new user to DraftKings, you put in $10 there. You can get all of the premium content from hoop-ball.com for free. Quite the deal. On the podcast today, we have Sacramento Kings beat blogger for Hoop Ball, Mr. John Schifferle. He and I get into what seems to be ailing the Kings offense in the half court as they're playing some of these tougher teams in the West. And then we cover, of course, the big news from yesterday, which is that Yahoo Sports report from Chris Haynes. With that, enjoy this episode of the Hoop Ball Sacramento Kings podcast. Back on the program, Sacramento Kings beat blogger for Hoop Ball, Mr. John Schifferle. How are you, sir?
Doing pretty well. How are you?
Sunday. Things are going a little sideways in Kingsland. My mood tends to mirror what's going on with them. I'm not sure why. It's probably not a healthy thing to do. We're recording here Sunday morning day after the Kings got beat by the Houston Rockets in Houston, 132-112. Let's run back the last couple games for these Kings. They played on Friday against the Memphis Grizzlies in Memphis. Since we last spoke, those are the last two games that have occurred. And there's a couple things that we want to enlighten the audience on that we've noticed. One thing in particular being, do you want to start with De'Aaron Fox? Let's start with De'Aaron Fox.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing him attack as much as I would like him to. I don't want to compare it to the beginning of the season, but because we're past that and whatever has happened, he needs to be attacking a ridiculous amount. He needs to be putting pressure on the defense constantly. And what I'm noticing, especially I noticed it a lot in the Houston game. I noticed it a little bit in the Memphis game, but more so in the Houston game. When he gets a guy on him and his first move or two does not work to get around that guy and get into the teeth of the defense, he's looking to pass. My preferred action for him would be to back the ball up, back it out, backpedal a little bit, and then get a running start. Try to put some pressure on that defense again to then open up the lanes and get open shots for people. Right now, it seems to me the big difference between one of the biggest differences between what they're looking at right now and what they had in the beginning of the season is the open shots are just not there. And De'Aaron Fox needs to be first and foremost the person creating those opportunities by getting into the paint, drawing people to him and kicking out. I'm just not seeing as much of it right now, and I want to see more of it. What say you, John Schifferle?
This one's tough for me because I do agree he needs to be more aggressive, like you said. And, I mean, you look at it, some of this is skewed by the fact that he's going to the line way more often than he did last year. Almost twice as often, I think. But he's actually taking fewer shots per 100 possessions than he did last year.
Wow.
And again, it ends up being more if you factor in the fact that, to get to the line twice as much, those are not counted as shots, but are essentially the same thing for the purpose of what we're talking about. But he just hasn't had that much of an increase in usage to this point. And I'd like to see him be more aggressive. He's shooting 50% overall, 42% from behind the arc, and he's just not going to be a 50%, 42% shooter this season if he's taking the number of shots he needs to. He's been insanely efficient, and even if you increase his usage to the point where he's shooting more like, 46% and let's say like 36% from three, he's still going to end up being. I mean, how much is he getting to the line at that point? He's probably getting to the line a ton. He's getting a lot of good shots. He's creating a lot for his teammates. I mean, I'd be thrilled if he usage that much.
Well, and it's becoming a little more easy to see what I'm talking about, at least, because Bogdanović is going the other way. Bogdanović is going to fight and claw to get what he wants within the offense, regardless of what the defender is doing to stop him. He wants to make a play at the rim. He's going to get to his spot and make that happen. There's a little more of a persistent attitude in his offensive play as opposed to De'Aaron Fox right now with regard to getting to where he wants on the floor. The other person who's having a little bit of a trouble with this is Willie Cauley-Stein, in my opinion. If Willie isn't given the space that he wants immediately to make the quick move that he's been so effective at early in this season, he's completely nullified. Yet yesterday against the Rockets, Capella didn't give him any space to get where he wanted to go, and Willie had no answer for that. He was not able to counter to that at all, and that's a problem for me because you're running up against experience all across this league, and if the book becomes they're not going to fight to get what they want on offense, it's going to make it pretty gosh darn hard for this team to thrive this season and continue to establish the identity they've worked so hard to put on the table early in this season.
With Capella, I think Willie needed to be more opportunistic. Like, they used to run a ton of handoffs between Cauley-Stein and I think particularly Buddy Hield was the other player in those early in the season. And Cauley-Stein would aggressively roll to the basket off of those. And he doesn't seem to be doing that as much. He's trying to go one-on-one more often, and Capella's just too big and too athletic to beat that way. I just don't think Cauley-Stein did not have it last night, first. But second, I don't think that that's going to be his game on a night-to-night basis. I think he needs to understand how to be more effective, either, rolling to the basket off a handoff or off a screen or, whatever it might be. He needs to be a little bit more of a secondary option when he's out on the floor.
And really what we're talking about here is we want them to, I guess it's hard to say, oh, well, we want Fox and Bogdanović and whoever to probe to get what they want to get to on offense. That takes up time. What's the difference between them doing that and getting into an offensive set? How do they determine which way they want to go so that they're not crunched at the end of shot clock and getting into situations like that?
I've seen some situations where Fox is trying to get the ball up the floor, and like Troy Williams has done this a couple times, Amon Shumpert has done this a couple times, where they take like way off balance threes in transition that they just don't need to take. And Fox is doing the right thing and getting the ball up the floor and trying to see if they can get some sort of advantage. But it's really on those players, to me, to see, can they understand when they should take advantage and when they should pull back and get it back to Fox and let him create. Because getting the ball up in transition every time is going to be important for this team. But the second step there is understanding when you don't have an advantage and when you just need to slow down. So get the ball up every time, slow it down if you need to, and then I think Fox will get more usage out of that. But part of it, to me, seems like they have some players that are not the best passers, they're just not that versatile yet. They get the ball and they decide what they want to do with it. And, I think that hurts Fox to a certain extent. So some of it's just going to be growth from the other players on the team.
But somebody's going to be making a decision. Am I going to be taking the ball into the teeth of the defense, trying to find an advantage, or are we going to sit up here and run offense? Right now, it seems like that decision is being made a little too late. Like Fox will probe, he'll figure out he doesn't have anything, pass it to somebody else, and then that person is tasked with trying to go one-on-one and make something happen. It's clearly not working too well. It's not the strength of many guys on this team beyond Fox and Bogdanović. Buddy works well inside of what's happening with the offense. When they run it, otherwise, putting him out there by himself to create space, he does have some moves for it, but I like to see what he does in the offense. I think it suits him well. He's clearly playing well within it this season based upon the numbers that he's putting up. Is it detrimental to Buddy and the rest of the offense? I guess, of course, it's not detrimental to the offense to actually run the stupid offense, but like what I don't know what the how you manage to do it for so many games and all of a sudden figure out, well, we don't have it. And I guess that kind of speaks to the fact that when you have a young team, you can't expect a straight line trajectory to the team being better. And right now we're in a little bit of a trough after we hit that peak with the early part of the season. What's it going to take for them to figure out they need to be crisp with their decisions early in the shot clock so they can set them up well to put pressure on the defense?
Well, I think it's parts of three different things. And first is, like you said, they're young and they're going to go through periods where they're really good and they're going to go through periods where they really struggle. And that's just going to be the reality for this season. And honestly, probably next season too. Hopefully less. But I think second is the fact that they're playing a lot of really, really good teams right now. And those teams are not going to be as easy to beat with simple stuff. And I think some of what the Kings run is not the most complicated offense. And I think once a few things don't work, they kind of get a little more into that isolation offense and they stop moving the ball. And I guess that gets more back to them being a young team. But second is just a tough schedule. And then third, for me, really is the fact that teams have seen that the Kings are going to run every time and they're doing everything they can to stop that. So, if the Kings can turn up the intensity and they can keep this going, I think they have an easier schedule up in December, and it's just going to get better for that reason alone. But the Kings are going to have to learn, when you're in a tough situation, when you're playing a tough team and you're down, how do you stick with what you know works?
Yeah, I think it does have a lot to do with the fact that they're playing these better teams who can more capably defend offense and make themselves felt by the other team a good bit more. What I would like to see from Willie especially is not take the time, but make that quick move. If you know what's working for you, do that. And actually, let's extend that to the rest of the team, because when this team is taking quick shots, it's generally worked for them. It's worked really well. And that's also a function of them being decisive with what they want to do. When they are decisive, they're playing better. And it's been clear to me throughout the first 16 games of the season that when they're making those quick decisions, good things happen. That definitely needs to be what they do moving forward, at least in my opinion, because the longer that shot clock runs, the more the advantage goes to the defense. Right now, they don't have the counter moves to deal with that. And if Fox and Bogdanovich don't have their hands on the ball late in the shot clock, it hasn't ended up well for this team. They're getting a poor shot out of that in those situations. Is there anything else you'd like to say on this topic before we head to something else?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. I mean, we'll see what happens in December.
The next thing I want to bring up here is Bielitsa is clearly the weak link on defense, and he got murdered on Friday night against Jaren Jackson Jr. It was bad. Like after the third time, some adjustment has to be made. Somebody's got to notice something. Go to some other matchup. Move Willie onto Jaren Jackson Jr. Put Bielitsa on Marc Gasol. Some might say that's a worse matchup for the Kings. Try something. Just take Bielitsa out. Move around the matchup some sort of way, because it was very clear to see that was going to be problematic for the Kings. I could see it. I'm sure everybody else could see it. I'm not sure why it took so long for Jaeger to do something in that situation.
I mean, it's sort of the opposite of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, if he beats you 3 times, don't keep doing what you're doing. Even if you think, all right, yeah, Marc Gasol might be a worse matchup for him, and that might even go worse, at least try it, because you know this isn't going to work, and you're not going to win the game if Bielitsa is guarding Jaren Jackson Jr. But, yeah, I think the worst sign for me was Bielitsa's always going to struggle when other teams put him in space and make him guard in space. That's just not something he's going to be good at. But I saw a couple times where Jaren Jackson just outmuscled him in the post. Mm-hmm. And that's when you know, all right, if he's not strong enough for Jaren Jackson, then he just doesn't have any chance. He can't do this. At least if you put in Marvin Bagley, Bagley's going to be a little better in space. And, you know, I think in the first Memphis game showed that he actually does have some ability to defend Jaren Jackson pretty well, at least better than he was defended Friday night.
Let's see, what was Bielitsa's matchup last night? What was it against Tucker last night?
I think so.
Yeah, and he dealt okay with that. I didn't see any massive issues there because Tucker wasn't exactly putting a lot of pressure on him.
Well, I mean, he only played 13 minutes, so I don't fully remember who Bielitsa was matched up on, but he wasn't much better last night and really did get beat pretty bad.
And it's unfortunate that his play offensively has taken a bit of a hit as well. But we just said he has issues guarding space on defense. Offensively, when we get him in space with the ball, he can do some things. And right now, the Kings offense is not creating enough space, and that's been detrimental to somebody like him because he can use it so effectively. Right now, when a guy bodies him up, it's hard with his lack of lateral quickness to move, make some plays out of that, especially when he's being guarded by a guy on the other side of the ball who's got a little more athleticism than him. Yeah,
and I think to a certain extent this season, De'Aaron Fox is a good playmaker, but Buddy Hield hasn't really been a consistent playmaker for the team. Iman Shumpert's done it from time to time, but isn't really a secondary ball handler for a real team. And so I think having a player like Bielitsa play and actually provide some sort of ball movement, some sort of spacing for this team was really big without Bogdanovic in. But now that Bogdanovic is playing, I think he played almost 20 minutes last night. Hopefully that minutes restriction is lifted at some point in the near future. If Bogdanovic can start playing 30 minutes a game again, I don't know that you need Bielitsa as much as you did earlier in the season when you didn't have as many playmakers. So at that point, it seems like more of a no-brainer to me to get Bagley in there more. And even Giles at that point, just because, Bielitsa is going to be a player that's going to have some great games from time to time, but as we've seen, isn't necessarily that consistent and, is more useful in a team without playmakers.
It becomes a scenario where we get back to the existential question for the Sacramento Kings. Who is going to be the fifth guy or the three, so to speak? I guess in this case it would be Bogdanovic. Who is going to be the fifth guy if Bielitsa is not the one that's going to be in the lineup? Is it Troy Williams? Is it Justin Jackson? Is it Iman Shumpert? Is it Harry Giles, Marvin Bagley Jr.? Who would you like to see in that fifth spot along with Fox, Hield, Bogdanovic, and Willie Cauley-Stein?
To start games right now, I may just give it to Bagley to see what he can do. I mean, I'll give it to Bagley that last night he was much better as a rebounder, which he has struggled on the defensive glass, at least this season. And last night he got away from trying to play in the post as much. He did take advantage of being guarded by Chris Paul a couple times in the post, which obviously if you have someone like that on him, he has to try and take advantage of that. Otherwise, the Rockets are just going to keep doing it and keep running out that advantage. So good for him for taking advantage there. When he didn't have that type of size advantage, good for him for facing up or just trying to be near the basket for lobs or whatever it was. I think he played well last night, and if he can keep doing that, then he needs to be in the starting lineup.
I think he's fine where he's at. We'll get into this a little bit later, but I don't see any necessary reason to put him in the starting lineup. He's playing enough minutes. Are we going to sit here and cause issues over the fact he's playing 22 minutes instead of 30 minutes? I don't think he's the fifth guy. Of all the possibilities that the Kings have at the moment, I think Bjelica is the best person to have in there. Yeah. I think you can hide him on defense. There's matchups you can go to, especially because Willie has such great defensive utility. There's ways to get creative to allow Bjelica to be on the floor. I would like to see the Kings execute some of those, because right now it seems like they're being fairly fundamental with what their defensive matchups are. If you can get a little more creative with that, it's going to allow Bjelica to be out on the floor more without being hounded by some of these poor defensive matchups.
I would say Bagley is so much better when he's on the floor with Fox and Bogdanovich than he is when those two are not on the floor. So I'd rather have Bjelica out there when you're running out lineups of like Troy Williams and Costa Koufos and Buddy Hield and let's say, even Frank Mason. Like, you need another playmaker in there at that point, and that's not going to be Bagley. So I would rather see Bjelica in those lineups. If you have Fox and Bogdanovich on the floor, you have a lot of shooting, you have a lot of playmaking, and of course Buddy Hield's out there as well. So I think that's where you can really take advantage of what Bagley does well right now. But I don't know that it's a question of he should be the fifth guy because he needs 30 minutes a game as much as I want him to be the fifth guy out there because that's where he's going to play the best.
Let's transition here to the one more thing before we get to the big news of the day in Sacramento Kingsland. The Jason Anderson, beat reporter for the Sacramento Kings, he called the Buddy Hield and Iman Shumpert conversation that was happening on the court, I think it was during halftime, heated. I did not see anything that made that heated to me. It looked like a couple of guys trying to work through something that was happening on the court that needed to be dealt with. It didn't seem to me to jump out as anything in particular newsworthy at the time.
I didn't see the conversation, but I did see in the first half that Buddy Hield was pretty frustrated with some of the fouls that he was getting called for, especially that offensive foul where he got called for the charge. Mm-hmm. He was not happy about that. It's about the angriest I've seen him get on the court, honestly, since he joined the Kings. So I could see where Buddy might have just been heated in general, and you go and talk to him, and that's just the way he's going to respond because he's clearly not happy about the situation, and maybe he's not even mad at Shumpert, and I'm sure, Shumpert with his years of experience in the league understands the difference between Buddy's mad and Buddy's mad at me. So I think, I don't know, I didn't see the conversation, so it's hard to comment too much on, but I could see where Buddy would have just looked heated talking to anyone after that first half.
I just thought they were just trying to clarify something, relay something. Didn't seem to me to be any newsworthy thing. And it quickly got papered over by the Yahoo News report that came out a couple hours before yesterday's game. Chris Haynes of Yahoo Sports dropping a bit of a bombshell that the Kings front office is not happy with how Jaeger is distributing the minutes early in this season. There is apparently, according to the report, a disagreement between the front office and the coaching staff about priorities. Win now versus develop the young guys. The front office would apparently like to see the Kings, and Jaeger in particular, of course, because he's the head coach, playing Scalabiciere, Harry Giles, and Willie Cauley and Marvin Bagley Jr. more minutes, as opposed to Bjelica, Troy Williams, Iman Shumpert. Actually, Iman Shumpert's not named in the report, but Troy Williams is. What were your thoughts on this? What were your takeaways? give me your initial impressions, John Schifferle.
Well, I think quickly on this, I interpreted the Troy Williams thing as we just signed this guy for depth. We didn't sign him to play, a major role in the rotation. We wanted to see him like almost the way that they're using like Scal right now, like end of games, and maybe if he's doing well, if there's an injury or something like that. I interpreted it as we're seeing a little too much of Troy Williams. That's not how you took it, though?
I took it as Troy Williams is playing minutes we want played by other players.
Okay, yeah.
More or less.
That's how I saw it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think you look at it, a lot of people first made a big deal out of Bagley playing as many minutes as he did last night. He played like 27, and he normally plays 22. It's not like it was that weird to see him play 27 minutes. And he played about as well as he's played in weeks. So, I'm just not shocked that he played as much as he did. But, I don't know. It kind of seems like something that you could maybe nitpick that Bagley should play a little more. But it's not like Bielitsa is playing a ton. Cauley Stein is theoretically a young part of this core. So, I don't know that you want to take a ton of the minutes from him. And Costa Koufis has played, 5 games this season? And not that much when he played. So who are you going to take the minutes from to get Scal, Giles, and Bagley in there a whole lot more than he already is? I mean, I guess Willie Cauley-Stein, but I don't know. It just didn't really add up to me. Like, who are you really that mad about in terms of their minutes? And if you're frustrated with Marvin Bagley playing 22 minutes versus maybe 28 to 30, that's just not a huge difference.
Okay, let's go back to the beginning here. A lot of people were saying they need to deal with the leak. There is no way to know where the information came from. Haynes is not going to let us know. It could just as easily be outside of the organization as inside the organization. If I'm Jaeger, I look at this situation and I think, I had a lot of big men. And instead of drafting a player who would have more so fit the needs of the team and made a lot more sense on positional balance, that would have made my job a lot easier. But instead, you doubled up on a position where there's already a million guys. And then, once you paint me into that corner, you're going to be upset with how I'm balancing said minutes. Yeah, what the heck? What the heck? And then to top it off, he's doing extremely well with how he balances those minutes. The team won. The team was playing well. I have a problem with thinking, like we've mentioned before on the pod, giving minutes to young players that don't deserve it or aren't playing well. The coach wants to win. The coach knows that winning cures all. Winning is the sales of sports. It cures all. Always will, always has. The front office, for some reason, and partly probably because they realize that their necks are not out there on the line. I think, we've covered this before. Vlade is safe. I don't think this came from Vlade's wing of the front office for sure. It adds up to being what the heck? Like it doesn't add up at all in any way, shape, or form. Like Bagley's playing 22 minutes, and we're gonna be upset that he's not playing 28 minutes or 30 minutes. We're gonna be upset maybe by the optics of, one rookie's playing well, he's getting more minutes, and because of that, we're upset that our guy's not playing more minutes. It's making us look bad for who we took. Something along those lines. Like, just what the heck? What in God's name? What are we doing here?
I mean, we'll have to see what happens over the next couple weeks. It'll be interesting to see what else comes out. It seems like, Villere put out that statement. Jason Anderson from the Sacramento Bee said something, I don't have the exact quote, but he said something to the effect of like, when you're a journalist, there are things you know for sure, there's things you're pretty sure you know, and there's things that, you just don't really know. And he said, I'm pretty sure I know that this isn't on the table. Firing Yeager is not something that's really being discussed right now. So he didn't definitively come out and say, I'm sure he's not going to be fired, but basically confirming, this doesn't really add up with what I do know. And we didn't really see any follow-up reports confirming it. Chris Haynes is good at what he does, but I don't know that, this may have just been one sort of rogue person that wanted to get a narrative out there. I don't know who that would have been, and I don't really know what it means for the team going forward. But it is going to be interesting to see how does this affect if Marvin Bagley does start getting 30 minutes a game. If Skal does start playing over someone like, Bielitsa or one of the other vets, how does the team react to that? Do they feel like, does it get a little more contentious in the locker room? Does that affect the way that the season goes? I mean, there's a lot to see how the team reacts to this, and I think that's going to be the key, because Vivek has to know at this point how stupid it would be to fire a coach that's doing as well as Yeager is right now. And not only that, but just to fire a coach in the middle of the season. That's just not – he knows that doesn't go well for him. And I would also say at this point, if you don't like the product of the team and you want to make a move, again, I strongly disagree with firing Dave Yeager, but if you're going to do it, you kind of just have to clear everything out. I think you need to start over. I don't think Yeager's the problem here, and – if you fire him and you bring in a new coach, that really sets back the time that you have to start fresh everywhere. And I think that's really what the team would be looking to do if they did move Yeager, or at least what I think they should be looking to do. Again, I don't think he should be fired. I think they should just stay on course, but it just doesn't really add up to me. But it'll be interesting to see what the team does to react to it.
Part of me, like, because I come out with one reaction and then I hear you talk and I have another reaction to it. Part of me thinks,
yeah,
wait, you telling me in professional sports, when the stakes are so high, that guys are frustrated with what their playing time is? Like,
yeah,
really? That's a news story that garners a write-up and the whole deal. Like, that was really at the core of the whole thing. Oh, well, this guy's upset with his minutes. This other guy's upset with his minutes. We had alluded to it on the podcast that Yogi Ferrell, who opted out of re-signing with the Dallas Mavericks, came to the Sacramento Kings and is proceeding to ride the bench. I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess he's probably not happy with that. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that Skal is probably not happy with how few minutes he is playing. And big shocker, Marvin Bagley Jr., who wants to play 48 minutes if he could, is upset he's only playing 22. Like, part of me wants to think, well, it's not even really a story. It's like the Kings fan in me wants to think, oh, well, big effing deal, some guys are upset with their minutes. That is the case probably on 20 teams in the NBA, give or take, somewhere around there. Why in the God's name does Chris Haynes need to be go out there and writing a report on the issues that the Kings are having with, or the tension that is being had in the Kings organization with how many minutes these guys are being played? It may not even be with the front office. It may not even be in the Kings organization. It may be the agents of some of these guys saying that there's tension. And I also, and another thing here, Villere came out and people made hay of the fact that he didn't deny the story. I don't think that the Villere or the PR operation for the Kings is playing chess when everybody else is playing checkers. I think they're just, I think they're just kind of flinging something out there without thinking, without keeping their hand on the chess piece, so to speak, and looking at the 360 view of this and everything that they need to take into account to ensure that this doesn't blow up into a bigger story. That seems to me like it was a quick thing that was put out without thinking about all the implications of it, to me it seems, thinking about this, talking about it with you, it seems like it's less of an issue than it initially appears to be. I think the shock for Kings fans of seeing something else come into the news about friction between the front office and the coaching staff was a little shocking for us. I think that papers over the initial, or the reaction that we should have, which is, isn't this something that a lot of teams face? So it's sort of similar to what we talked about, and I guess this feeds right into it. This is part of it. Having a bunch of guys who play the same position is going to cause friction amongst the minutes distribution of those guys.
Well, I think the story more appropriately was that the front office was unhappy with the minutes, which is the story to me. I mean, if Harry Giles or Scal, who I think are the only two who have, I could understand why they'd be frustrated, only because Scal did bulk up this offseason. That doesn't mean he deserves minutes, but I could see where he'd be like, all right, give me a shot. And then Harry Giles, who was pumped up by the team for so long, to sort of ride the bench in this way and fall out of the rotation, I could see where he would think, he'd love to be playing 10 minutes a game at least, or at least had higher expectations for what was going to happen for him this season. At the same time, I don't think either of those players has really much to complain about at this point based on the way that they've played. So I don't think that's a reasonable story. I think it was just him saying the front office is not happy. It's just tough to say. Like, it is kind of the front office's fault. How are you going to give the guy, 6 centers to play and then get frustrated that not every single one of them is playing 30 minutes a game? Because that's just not how basketball works. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I don't know, if the Kings were 4-12, it would make more sense to me. Or if the Kings were winning solely on the back of, Iman Shumpert, Yogi Ferrell, and Nemanja Bjelica, and everyone else was pretty much riding the bench for the most part, then I understand why you're frustrated that your team's 8-8 and you're not seeing anything from your young guys. But the fact is, if the Kings do anything meaningful this season, it's going to be because De'Aaron Fox is unbelievable. And it's going to be because players like Bogdan Bogdanovic and Buddy Hield step up and show that they can do something. So there's just no way to be mad about winning in that environment.
I've completely forgot what I was going to say, and I'm going to remember it here in maybe I won't.
It'll come back.
No, I don't think it's there. Oh, I know. I remember what it was now. He's the coach is essentially in a contract year. I don't put Vlade in a contract year because Vlade is never going to be in a contract year. He's going to be CTCing until he's dead from the Sacramento Kings organization. That's my personal take. Jaeger, how can the front office sit there think this when you take a look at Jaeger's contract situation? Also, coupled with the fact that coaches are going to play the roster in such a way that it maximizes their chances of winning. Just couple those two things together. How can you not expect him to do what he thinks is best to get the team to win? That's where the dissonance comes from me. Like, how, and add those two things together. Where does it? I have trouble with believing that there was front office sourcing here in the Sacramento Kings, directly inside the Sacramento Kings organization that led to this article. And that's kind of my last word on it, per se.
Yeah, I guess. But at the same time, the one that everyone always talks about is Bagley's dad, right? And I think, to me, the implication of that and saying, all right, yeah, he's gone on Instagram and complained about his son's minutes, and that's a sign that he would do something like this. But to me, if you're Chris Haynes and Bagley's dad comes up to you and says, hey, yeah, I hear the front office is unhappy, and if my son doesn't start playing more and a couple of these other guys don't start playing more, Dave Joerger could be out of here. the first thing that anyone who's ever reported anything would do is call the front office and see if they can get any of their sources to confirm this. Like, you can't write a story based on what Bagley's dad says. And that's where I feel like it did have to come from quite a few people close to the organization, or at the very least one person inside in the organization. Does that mean it's true? No. But it would be pretty irresponsible to report this solely on what Bagley's dad says.
Someone in this equation is being extremely ignorant.
Or irresponsible, yeah.
Or irresponsible. Given the folks who are leading the front office for the Kings, because those guys are former players, I would have, Paige and Villere are at least, I just have problems feeling like it's them. If it's somebody in the front office, to me, it's got to come from Brandon Williams' wing of the front office. If it's somebody that was inside the front office who gave this information to Chris Haynes.
I agree. And Villere, first, you've seen clips of him watching the games, and he looks thrilled. So it's hard to reconcile the image of him cheering and looking really happy about what's going on with he also wants to potentially fire the coach pretty soon here. So I don't think that adds up. And like you said, I was thinking about that today. They both played in the NBA a long time, Peja and Villere. And I'm sure both saw plenty of very talented young players that went on to have great careers in the NBA ride the bench a little bit in their first couple years. So this is not a new concept to them that a rookie might only be playing 22 minutes a game, even if he is the second overall pick. I mean, it doesn't reconcile with me that they wouldn't understand that, given how long they played and what they know about the league.
I think we've pretty well hit on it. Is there anything else in particular, in beyond this Yahoo Sports report, anything else that you would like to hit on before we hippity hop on out of here?
No, I think that was pretty much all we had.
Yeah, I think so. That'll do it. Put in our Sunday morning work here on the Hoopball Sacramento Kings podcast. You can find John Schifferle on Twitter at John Schifferle. You can find me on Twitter at my buddy Chris. For all of Hoopball Sacramento Kings coverage on Twitter, it's at Hoopball Kings. And for all of your NBA news, NBA fantasy news, and Sacramento Kings coverage, period, it's hoop-ball.com. Schiff, did you write a piece for the site earlier today? You want to plug that at all, or was there nothing?
No, I have one coming up today, though.
Oh, okay. So look for that piece from John Schifferle. Do we have any idea what it's going to be about?
It's going to be about what we just talked about, actually.
Oh, okay. So look for that. Look for that on the site. If you're playing fantasy basketball, you need to pick up the season pass via hoop-ball.com. That gets you all of the premium content for fantasy basketball so that you can win your league. If you are would be a new user to DraftKings, you deposit $10 in there. You can get the season pass from Hoopball for free. Quite the deal there for you. You can find this show on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, the Hoopball Radio app, as well as the iHeartRadio app. Both of those apps are available for free to download in the iTunes and Google Play stores. For John Schifferle, I'm Christian Villere. See you next time.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.